So you are no longer with your toxic ex, or you have left the relationship that was toxic for whatever reason. Maybe it wasn't your ex that was toxic. Maybe it was just a toxic dynamic. Well done for breaking free. This is going to mean that you're healthier and happier, and you've definitely done the right thing. However, it can be difficult, and the chances of you relapsing and going back to your ex, or chasing your ex again, or reaching out and trying to contact your ex after you've gone no contact, can be quite high in the early stages when people are still emotionally attached and you're still feeling strong emotions in relation to your ex-partner. So here are 13 signs that you might be at risk of relapse and going back, or trying to go back to your ex. Sign number 1 is nostalgia. So you think about the relationship and you think about the good times, you think about the fun times, you think about the times when your ex was really loving towards you and gave you the love that you need, made you feel really desired and wanted, and put you on a pedestal, and how great it made you feel. So reflecting on those past memories and discounting all of the bad things and the pain that you experienced puts you at risk of reaching out and going back to your ex, or desiring to go back to your ex so much that you might contact them. Number 2 is ignoring red flags, or minimizing them so much and reframing them in your mind to the point that you no longer see them as significant reasons why you left the relationship. Perhaps you start to take your ex-partner's perspective and think of new reasons actually why they might be right and why they might have been reasonable in the way that they thought or acted or treated you. So for example, if your partner was very neglectful towards you, didn't give you much attention, you might rationalize that, well, they were going through a hard time, they were working really hard in their life, and therefore it would have been impossible for them to balance everything. So you previously, while in the relationship, might have felt very neglected and deeply in pain, and very much felt that you couldn't tolerate and couldn't stand a relationship like that. But when you're doing this kind of toing and froing of the grief process, essentially, of trying to get over the relationship, you can go from one emotion and then go straight into another emotion. You can go from completely thinking that you've made the right decision in leaving the relationship to actually thinking about all these reasons why your partner might have had a reason for acting in the way that they did. So be careful about minimizing the red flags. If it was a red flag previously, then it's still going to be a red flag if you go back to the relationship. Number 3 is loneliness. If you're feeling particularly lonely, then this could be a sign that you will long for this past relationship and potentially reach back out to your ex. So try to do things that actually make you feel very connected to people. This doesn't necessarily need to be going on dates or trying to find a new romantic partner. It can just be being around like-minded people, people who make you laugh, people who make you feel really good, people whose company you enjoy. So socialize to a reasonable level. Of course, it's all about balance. You don't want to over socialize to the point of distraction, because you need some space to actually feel your emotions as well and go through the grieving process. So it's trying to get that balance right of enough time to be by yourself so that you can process those very difficult emotions of the breakup that you're going through, but also actually not allowing yourself to get too lonely, because loneliness will mean that you would be quite likely to long for this past relationship and actually start to idolize it again and think that it wasn't as bad as it really was. Sign number 5, emotional vulnerability. So be very mindful of your mental fitness, which can go up and down. Some days we feel really good, confident, happy, enjoying life. Other days we can have lower mood, or we could have anxiety or sadness or frustration, or things might not be going as well in life. We might have stresses, strains, other things in our life that are tough. And then we might reflect on the relationship and remember it as a time that we felt particularly happy. And then you might associate that with, if I go back into the relationship, I can feel that happiness again, or that relationship will provide me with the emotional support, even though your ex-partner might have not been consistent with their emotional support towards you. So be careful about being emotionally vulnerable. And if you are experiencing difficult emotions, just give yourself space to tune into what you need and making sure that balance is right in your life. Are you eating well? Are you getting enough exercise? Are you looking after yourself? Are you speaking to your friends? Are you doing everything to try and top up your mental fitness? Of course, it's not about feeling perfect, but it's just about actually doing the right things where you're doing yourself justice in relation to looking after your mental health. Because emotional vulnerability could make you want to have someone in your life who will care for you, and you might remember the times that your ex cared for you, which might have been the good times in the relationship, but not consistently. You might assume that if you go back to that relationship, your ex will give you exactly what you need emotionally, but that might not be the case. Number 7 is that you might ignore your own personal growth. Perhaps when you left this relationship, you were determined to grieve this relationship properly and to move on and to choose a better partner for yourself, assuming that this past relationship was quite toxic and that it wasn't a good partner. So your personal growth goal might be that actually you'll start inviting better partners into your life. And that might be something that you're highly committed to on good days, but that it slips up on bad days and you forget that that's your goal. You lose the motivation, you lose the focus on the fact that you want that to be your future, and then you start fantasizing and daydreaming about trying to actually get back with your ex and imagine that the future is going to be better than how things were in the past. Which leads me to number 8, which is fantasizing about your ex. So this is basically remembering what the relationship was like, and then you fast forward into the future and you think about having more fun with your ex, having better times, the things you could do together, relationship goals, maybe having children, and you fantasize about this better future, even though that was not the reality that you had in the past, or it was quite short-lived. You get very hopeful, overly hopeful, and have very wishful thinking about the positive prospects of this relationship, even though the relationship might have broken down and gone into very toxic territory beyond repair. Sign number 9 that you might relapse and try to go back to your ex is idolizing them. So you start to focus on all of their positive qualities and you forget about their negative qualities. You might also make excuses for their past bad behavior and you put them on a pedestal. Essentially, the person that you're fantasizing about and idolizing is not really the partner that you were in a relationship with, because you forget about their shortcomings. You forget that they're not perfect, and you expect that they're going to give you a lot more happiness than is actually realistic. Sign number 10, excusing their past bad behavior, which is similar to other signs that I've mentioned, but you basically make up excuses in your head as to why some of the things they did were okay and it wasn't as bad as what you thought, and you forget about how bad you felt at the time. And this is the problem with time, that our feelings get better. So actually you forget how painful it was when they behaved in a certain way towards you. So you need to really kind of get quite realistic about the way that they treated you in the past. And if you believed it was bad behavior once and it hurt your feelings and they weren't available to you to have constructive conversations about how bad their past behavior was, then you have an emotionally unavailable ex who didn't care enough about your feelings to talk through conflict, and essentially probably avoided conflict. So try not to idolize them and try not to make up excuses for their past behavior. Sign number 11 is that actually you fall for their emotional manipulation. So there might be 2 sides to this story. Perhaps your ex is actually tempting you and they are promising to change, and they're dangling a carrot in front of you that makes it highly desirable to get back with them. If you've got no contact for quite a period of time, it's actually quite likely they will reach out if they haven't moved on from you. And that's risky because even though you might have moved on, you might have been quite far ahead in the process, if they reach out to you and you're not completely over them, you might be quite vulnerable to emotional manipulation. So just because they say that things are going to be different in the future, you can't necessarily take that as being certainty. You have to look at the past and how much did certain cycles repeat themselves, because that's usually a good indicator of predicting future behavior. Sign number 12 that you might start chasing your ex again is that there is some unfinished business. Now, unfinished business might just be feelings of things not being completely wrapped up for you. Perhaps you expected that relationship to go a much longer stint. Perhaps you weren't really ready to leave. You just had to leave because it was particularly toxic or your needs were not being met. But you imagined that that relationship would play out for much longer. Perhaps you had an idea in your mind that that relationship would reach marriage, or that you would have children together, or that you'd be together for many years. And if that relationship ended much shorter than what you had planned and what you had previously hoped for, it might feel like very much unfinished business for you. And if the relationship actually ended extremely early on, this will probably particularly feel like huge unfinished business if you've got strong emotions for your ex-partner. So that will lead to a temptation to want to complete things and want to almost get to the finish line of that relationship, like play it out a bit more. For good or bad, it just feels unfinished, and therefore you want to invest a bit more, even though you actually know it's not necessarily going to be healthy. It just doesn't feel like it's done for you. Finally, sign number 13 that you might relapse and potentially look towards going back to your ex is that you're ignoring self-care. So you're forgetting about your own needs, you're forgetting about your emotions, and you're focusing more on the other person. Often, this is something that women do more than men, that women will often put people first. It's a very maternal instinct. They have to be able to do that with their children, to be able to raise their children well. So often women in relationships will put their male partners first. But not always. Of course, it can be the opposite way around, depending on the individuals who are involved here. But actually, forgetting about your feelings, forgetting about your needs, forgetting about actually how painful it is when you reach out to your ex and you get ignored or you don't get your needs met, and how much shame that causes, is also ignoring self-care for yourself, because you're not looking after the emotional impact that it's going to cause you or cost you, the emotional impact it's going to cost you if you start getting involved in this relationship again. So actually getting involved in risky behavior that actually really impacts your mental health and hinders you. So be careful if you're thinking about reaching back out to your ex. Be mindful of the fact that if your ex is very dismissive of you, if your ex doesn't want to get back with you, if your ex blames you for your past behaviors, puts you down, shames you for some of your past actions, this can really be highly impactful for you and can be quite dangerous for some people. If someone's ex triggers enough shame in them, it can lead some people to feeling very suicidal, depending on the individual and depending where they are with their mental health and how vulnerable they are to things going wrong in romantic relationships. Remember that your ex can trigger emotions in you that none of your friends probably can, and none of your family members probably can, because intimate romantic relationships tend to activate deeper emotions than other platonic relationships in people's lives. So just be careful in terms of your mental health. Reaching back out to your ex could cause you pain that you're not expecting and that you're not ready to actually deal with, and then you may suffer the consequences. So be very, very mindful of your emotional well-being and pay close attention to your self-care in every shape and form, including emotional, your physical well-being, making sure you're eating really healthy, making sure you're seeing friends. This is a vulnerable time for you. You're grieving, you're going through a lot of confusing emotions, and you're not necessarily going to be yourself. Your mood is probably going to be all over the place. In some stages of the grieving process, you're going to be in denial, and you're going to tell yourself that this relationship actually was okay and that it perhaps can work out. And in other stages, you're going to be very angry with your ex. And then in other stages, you're going to be very sad about the loss. So look up the 7 stages of grief, because actually when you go through a loss in a relationship, you really do have to grieve. And also, it's a good idea for you to be committed to the grieving process until you get to the acceptance stage at the very end. And that's perhaps going to take a number of months, depending on your particular relationship, how you regulate your emotions, how meaningful this relationship was to you, and what else is going on in your life. So be prepared to be in a state of grief for quite a few months, and lean into that, because the people who lean into that experience less depression in the long run over this relationship than people who try and suppress those emotions, ignore the grief, or cover them up by actually having a few more romances and toing and froing between their ex. So really be mindful that this is a state and a stage in your life where you really need to do the deep feeling that is required to get over your ex. If you do not do that properly, and you don't allow yourself the space to grieve, and you reach out to your ex again and you drag yourself back into that cycle, then you're not going to get over your ex in a timely manner. And that's not going to be very good for your mental health and your mental well-being. The cycle is going to go on for a lot longer than you need to, and that means you're preventing yourself from meeting someone else, because while you still have very strong emotions for your ex, it makes it really difficult to meet new partners. Of course, get out there and date if you feel ready to do so, but that's a very individual thing, because if you're in too much pain, you're grieving too much, it might not be appropriate and it might not be fair to new partners that you might be meeting, because you actually might be emotionally unavailable as a result of trying to grieve this relationship. If the relationship you were in was quite a brief relationship, then you might be ready to get out there again. Only you know whether it's actually healthy for you to be meeting new people. And a good indicator as to whether it's healthy for you to be meeting new people is actually focusing on and reflecting on, how do you feel when you're on dates with new partners? Do you feel at ease and in the present moment, and you can really engage with the conversation and focus on it, even though it might not be the best date of your life? Are you in the present moment, or are you actually distressed on the date, or are you thinking about your ex on the date? If you're not in the present moment on these dates, then it's probably a sign that you need to spend more time processing the emotions that you're feeling as a result of this breakup. And then in the future, you can get back out there and start dating again. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to see more of my content, subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions about this topic, just drop them in the comments below.